Hello, this is Dragon 1400, and about a while ago, like maybe 4 or 5 months ago or whatever, I did a video on Jaune and Ruby and how I thought they were going to get together. Now, I still think it's definitely possible that they're going to get together, but after like watching volume all the way 4, but that doesn't really have much to do here. But volume really 1 through 3, again, I kind of discovered like a new ship that I might like, and that's Jaune and Weiss together. Well, as the title says, Jaune and Ruby versus Jaune and Weiss. I think that's what I'm going to call it anyway. So I'm going to start off with like Jaune and Ruby. Like I said, like my first viewing of it, it was kind of, to me, I thought it was obvious that Ruby's going to end up with Jaune. Ruby's the main character, and Jaune was actually in episode 1, and the first conversation Ruby had with someone besides her sister, which that's her sister, so it doesn't really count, is Jaune. Like when she's meeting people, she had a horrible interaction with Weiss and kind of a little bad one with Blake, but Jaune was like her first like really actually good interaction with someone, and they do talk in like episode 2 for a bit about nothing. They didn't even know where they're going. Now, also, like, when people are picking up partners, like, Ruby, of course, try to pick her sister first, but if not, the first person she thinks of is Jaune, but she realizes, though, he might not be good in battle, so she disregards him, but that being said, she did think of that she could carry a conversation. That being said, like the really next big interaction was Ruby was the one to help Jaune out with his team in Volume 1, Episode 14, when Jaune was going through like kind of his arc with Carden, excuse me, and kind of really struggling. Carden had some stuff on him about that would get him kicked out of school. So it was, I'm sure everyone's seen that episode, but Ruby was the one to give him advice. Now, as the story continues, I think this part is actually very important from like a story perspective, even though it doesn't seem that important. It's that when Jaune is fighting that Grim to protect Carden, of all people, who gave him a hard time, it's Pyrrha, which is obvious that she would be there, but I'll get more on that later. Ruby and Weiss was there. So both Ruby and Weiss was there, which I thought was like interesting. It was like, of all the people, I mean, why not have Ren and Nora there, his teammates? I don't know. I don't think it's random either. And the reason I don't think it's random is because, and I'll get more into this later, but Jaune and Weiss are kind of like the two most developed characters in the show as of right now. They've gone through the most changes and they had the most flaws really when the story began, and they improved the most as so far. Like, I'm not saying like later on. This is as up to Volume 4. I'm not saying later on, like, of course all the other characters are getting more developed. However, right now Jaune and Weiss has gone through the most like character development out of any other character. I think Jaune being the most, maybe. I don't know. Weiss has gone through a ton too, but I'll get more on that later in the video. That being said, that is a plus for Ruby, but it's also a plus for Weiss too. So it's kind of like, I mean, I think there's a reason both of them were there to see that moment, to see Jaune get confidence by Pyrrha helping him in secret. I don't know if they're ever gonna like talk about it or something. I'm not sure, but it just seems like there was a reason like those two characters were there. It just, to me. Now, back to Ruby again. In Volume 2, Episode 7, Jaune does like shortly take a bond with Ruby over their social awkwardness because them at the dance, and then Jaune goes and well, he conquers it basically, and he gets with Priya. The other things in Volume like 1, I think it was Episode 2, where Ruby sees Jaune training to Priya's video, but she doesn't mention anything. which is kind of like a really kind of negative for her, for Jaune and Ruby, just because a similar thing like later on, I don't know exactly when it happens, but a similar thing later on happens. Ruby sees something with Ren, and gets concerned, but doesn't mention anything either. So I mean, to me, that's more like supporting that that Ruby doesn't think of Jaune. She thinks of Jaune like she thinks of Ren or Nora, anyone, or Weiss, just as a friend, and that's it. But who knows? But there's also that moment at towards the end of Volume 4. I think it's episode. I want to say that I think it's episode 10, maybe it's 11, where Jaune gives Ruby a pet talk about Ruby's kind of being really down about the whole thing where she's feeling like it's her fault that Crow is injured. She feels like everyone's going to get hurt because of her. You know, Ruby has always had a lone wolf mentality, so her like caring about individuals, like it just. I'll talk about this in a bit, but it just seems like she has this lone wolf mentality, and it seems like she's not improving on it. It's like one of her flaws, but she's not really improving on it. Anyway, Jaune gives her a pet talk, which really does help her out, saying that she gave them the courage to go, that each one of them had their own reasons, which was good. It was a really good moment between those two. Now, the biggest reason against Jaune and Ruby, I would say, is that Ruby's lone wolf mentality, and that she has never shown any attraction to anyone in the show, ever. Like she hasn't. But that being aside, we know that Jaune has shown attraction to both Pure and Weiss. He has never shown attraction to Ruby though, but you know that could stuff like that could change. And like the reason I think Ruby's lone wolf mentality is like against his shift, because Jaune is like more of a leader. Now, in a sense, he would balance Ruby out to a degree. However, to me, Ruby seems more like taking after her Uncle Crow, in the sense that as time goes on, stuff's going to people are getting hurt. People close to her are gonna die, and it seems like she's gonna have to overcome at least part of her lone wolf mentality in order to win the day at the end, because she's gonna need her friends in the end, in the last battle for sure. But it seems like like after everything's said and done, she's gonna be more like a lone wolf, in the sense she's gonna go off by her own and make sure her friends and family don't get hurt. And I think that's gonna kind of prevent her from actually settling down with Jaune or really anyone else. So that's why I don't think, in the sense that Ruby's gonna like end up with anyone. I think that's kind of, and I know it seems like sad or whatever. Oh, the main character's not gonna get with anyone, but it just seems like it's more in her personality. Things could change, the story could evolve, and I'm sure it will. I'm sure things will change. But as of right now, she hasn't shown any significant improvement to it. I mean, if you look back, she went off alone pretty much almost in every single one of her adventures. She went off alone. She didn't like she tried to call her teammates when things got really hairy, and however, she always started off going alone, and a lot of times got her in trouble, to be honest. And that is a flaw in her character, and they might improve it. However, at this point in the story, I'm recording this after Volume 4, they have not. She has improved in Volume 4. I would say she didn't really go off alone at any point in there, but that Volume 4 didn't really focus on Ruby. It focused on the other three characters of Team RWBY, Blake, Yang, Weiss, and it focused on Ren, a little bit on Nora, and a little bit on Jaune. But Ruby was probably, in Volume 4, one of the least developed characters, which is fine. I mean, some people complain about that, but I personally like that they give time for these other characters, especially Ren, because he was, up until until Volume 4, we knew nothing about him. Like, out of the 8 main characters, we knew the least about him, and now we actually know a lot about him, which is a good turn. The biggest thing this ship has for it, Jaune and Ruby ending up together, is that Jaune, it's like I said, like Jaune was the first one to really talk to Ruby besides her sister, and her sister just took off, by the way, during that episode 2, and them having actually a good conversation. So that in itself, like a lot of times when you write a story, and it's not like a romance story, but it's a story where like it's like focused on action, adventure, or comedy, or whatever. And romance is kind of like a minor plot, which in Ruby's case it is. You tend to not waste those moments that you could have, but it could also be that, oh, John's an extremely important character, which I don't think anyone would argue that he's not, and that he's going to do something great at the end of the story. So it might have just been a way to introduce him. However, I am good with this ship. And the first time I watched RWBY, I thought Jaune and Ruby was gonna end up together for sure. I thought it was gonna be like, it's already been planned, and it might already be planned. I don't know. However, like rewatching it and having time to think about it, I do think like there's a better chance that Jaune will end up with Weiss. It's slightly better. Now, the reason I think there's a better chance that Jaune and Weiss will end up together, however, like I said, I'm fine with Jaune and Ruby ending up together. It makes sense, and from a narrative standpoint as well. I mean, Jaune and Weiss actually have more interactions for starters than Jaune and Ruby. Well, unless you count like Volume 4, their little interactions here and there that are just meant to be comical. However, like we already know Jaune likes Weiss. I mean, he hits on her in Volume 4. He tries to get her like in Volume 1, Episode 4. So kind of when they first introduced Jaune, immediately tries to hit on Weiss. He tries to get a date with her, and he tries to ask for advice in like Episode 5 and 6 and everything. Now, I think it's really clear that Jaune has, or at least had, feelings for Weiss. I mean, he got together with Priya and everything, and this is a lot of people still think Jaune and Priya is going to end up together. They are not going to end up together. Priya's not coming back. She's not going to come back in the sense that she's actually going to be physically there. So that all being said, like I do think Jaune will end up with someone, and I think the two main contenders are Weiss and Ruby. And like I said, it's obvious that Jaune likes Weiss, so we don't have to really talk about that much. Now, Weiss, on the other hand, like it's clear through the early volumes that she doesn't have any feelings for him at all. She thinks of him that he's just asking her out for her money, for her prestige. She actually mentioned this. She's like how all these guys ask her out, and I think it's really funny. And actually, this is a plus for Jaune and Weiss, is that the reason Priya likes Jaune does not like Priya for her like status, for how well of a fighter she is, like everyone else. He didn't even know who she was. And that's kind of like the same thing that Weiss would actually like a guy for. That Jaune wouldn't like Weiss just because her status, just because she's rich, but because of who she is. And that's interesting. That's like the reason Priya likes Jaune. And it would make sense, like logically, that Weiss would, if Weiss starts seeing Jaune in a different light, how he truly is, that Jaune just likes Weiss because of her, that she might actually feel the same way towards Jaune that Priya feels for Jaune. Okay, so what happens is Jaune selflessly helps Neptune to be with Weiss because he knows that Weiss wants to be with her, with Neptune. Neptune actually tells Weiss this, and you can like see in the scene. I'm not sure if I'm gonna be able to get a screenshot or not, but if I do, I'll post it here, that Weiss actually, this is where Weiss starts to think of Jaune differently. And she realizes that he's actually a good guy. She never apologizes for how cold she acts and towards him and everything. However, this is like where her perception of Jaune does change. I mean, it's interesting that they actually use someone that's actually like Jaune, that Weiss likes. Neptune is a lot, like I said, a lot of ways like Jaune. I mean, Neptune is a better fighter and everything, but he is kind of a funny, goofy character, and in a lot of ways, Jaune is a lot like him. So I think that's interesting that they used a character that's like Jaune to change Weiss's perspective of Jaune, which is like, I think that's actually really good. If Jaune and Weiss do end up together, I think that's actually a really good writing, um, a really good narrative that they made there. Now we see and we end up knowing that Weiss did change her perspective on Jaune for 2 points that happen in Volume 3. The first is very minor, and I missed it the first time I watched it, but Weiss was actually during Team Juniper's fight at the Vital Festival. Weiss was the first person to notice Jaune's improvement. And I think it was debunked by Yang or Blake or someone by saying, "Oh, but he has nothing on Priya." Like, of course he has nothing on Priya. No one out of the 8 main characters have anything at Priya at this point. Priya is like next level. Like, if Priya was there during the fight with Tyrion in Volume 4, like, as long as they fought together, they might have been able to beat Tyrion, actually, because Priya was able to go up to against Cinder, who had the full power, the full maiden power at the time. She lost, but she actually stood her own and fought. So, like, saying that, oh, Jaune has nothing to Priya, well, I'm sorry, but no one does. None of those characters do at that point. I mean, she was complimented by Crow, who we know is next level, because he was able to go one-on-one with Tyrion, which Team Ranger, we're kind of getting the butts kicked by Tyrion. That's 4 against 1. So I'm just saying that power level scale, like, why would you compare Jaune to Priya? That's kind of like a slap in Jaune's face, to be honest. But like I said, like, Weiss didn't do that. She actually complimented him that he's improved. The second time, and this time is very much apparent, is that when Jaune calls Weiss at the end of Volume 3, Chapter 12, I believe, he begs Weiss to go and help Pure out against Cinder, that Pure stands no chance against Cinder because of her maiden powers, which is shown to be true. Cinder was able to take down Osmond, so that's definitely true. But Pure was going to face her destiny one way or another. That being said, like, Jaune is kind of panicking at this point, and Weiss, though Jaune is like begging them to help Pure, Weiss does not let it go that she's asking that if Jaune's okay, and she keeps asking it. You can tell that she's really, really concerned about Jaune, and though Jaune says, "Don't worry about me," it's obvious that Weiss is worrying about Jaune in that scene. And this scene in particular, like, does show that there has been a shift in Jaune and Weiss's friendship, relationship. It's not like a relationship, but a relationship not in the terms of two people going out on dates, but a relationship in terms of, oh, this person's interaction with this person, like a friendship kind of thing. There has been a huge shift in their friendship, if you will, and that much is obvious by this scene. Now in Volume 4, they have had no interactions, but another thing I would like to note. Now, this isn't me coming up with this. This is I saw it on the forums. I'm not sure like who came up with it first, so I'm not going to give any names. However, like, it is it is shown that Weiss and Jaune are foils of one another in many different ways, and you can kind of search, like, if you want more information about it. I won't discuss in this video. You can kind of search like Jaune and Weiss's like foil or something like that. I'm sure you can find it on Google. That being said, like there are like many parallels to them, and like many things. Like they're like the up until Volume 4 where Yang gets trained, they're the only one shown training, and in Volume 4 so far the only ones shown training alone. Now this could just be that, oh, Jaune and Weiss are like really important to the story, and it's like also clear, like I said before, that they have had the most developed characters throughout the series so far. I mean, I guess you could almost include Yang in there, but not yet because we haven't seen like her. We haven't seen how she's changed yet. I mean, it seems like she's changed a little bit, but not that much. Whereas Weiss and Jaune have changed a lot. I mean, Weiss was kind of like just into herself, and she was really stuck up and everything. And now she's actually really caring. She sees people, she has friends, she sees people in a different light, and she has friends. Jaune, I mean, it's obvious he was weak, he was a goofball, but now he's a strong and capable leader of all things. So I mean, it's obvious that those two have gone through the most changes throughout the course of the series thus far. That could change, like I said. More characters can get more development, and as the series goes on. But as of right now, I mean, it's clear that Jaune and Weiss has had most character development, and I know that's like not like proof that, oh, Jaune and Weiss is gonna end up together or whatever. There's not a lot of different stories. Like the one with the most character development ends up with someone with bad character development, or character development we don't get to see. But I do think like there is a focus on these two characters. It's like I said, like Jaune with Ruby would be fine, but I just personally just like Jaune and Weiss, just because I think like that whole like dynamic between those two, and how Weiss changed because of what he did and what Neptune told her, her perspective on Weiss's perspective on Jaune changed because of that. I just think that's like an interesting dynamic, and I do hope as the series goes forward they have some more interaction with each other, and hopefully they get together in the end. I mean, if not, I hope Jaune gets with Ruby. I mean, a lot of people are still voting Jaune with Pierre, which Pierre is dead, which is why I'm just like, I mean, I understand, and Pierre was a huge point of Jaune's growth as a fighter, as a leader, and as a person in general. However, like, she's dead, so, and the whole thing is like, I would rather see Jaune and Weiss together than Jaune and Pierre, even if she does come back, because Pierre's like admiration towards Jaune was just it was really blinded by her attraction, whereas I think Weiss's admiration towards Jaune would be more realistic and developed over time. And yeah, I just like that more. Like she would respect him more for him, whereas Pierre sees Jaune in a completely different light, completely put in a different pedestal. Doesn't really see his faults and everything like that. I mean, she does to a degree, but you know, be more realistic about it. In all honesty, and these are just my thoughts. Like my character discussions, and this is just a way to discuss it. I'm not saying like, oh, absolute proof that Jaune's gonna end up with Ruby or Weiss. I mean, it's possible that you end up with a different character. I mean, I think it's obvious at this point that Jaune will end up with someone. So he'll get the girl in the end. Whoever that girl is, we don't know for sure. I think the degree of probability is that it's most likely to be Weiss, and then Ruby, and then some new character or slash a character that we have met but hasn't had much interaction with Jaune. Then I guess there's Pierre, which I think is the most unlikely since she's dead. But that being said, this is just a discussion video really about the two. Put your comments down there. Which one do you think? And kind of give your reasons why. I'd like to hear kind of your thoughts on the whole thing. This video like kind of proves that I am willing to change my perspective on the ship. Like I used to be really strong. I was like Jaune and Ruby for sure. But then I watched the series again and read some comments, and it changed my view that, oh, Jaune and Weiss is definitely a huge possibility. So, what are you guys' comments? Put it down below. I'd like to hear your thoughts, your opinions. Just be respectful. That's all I ask. Anyway, thanks for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed the what is this? Just hope you guys enjoyed the discussion. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one. Bye.